We're going to start by telling you that this is what Ukraine as a country looks like 30 days after the invasion began. Vladimir Putin launched what he called a special operation to denazify Ukraine. A month on, the capital city of Kyiv hasn't fallen. It's badly damaged. Russian military has been bogged down and a new Cold War has been triggered for real. Ukrainian cities now resemble ghost towns in neighborhood after neighborhood. But this has become familiar. Almost every day you're hearing basically the same thing. We're going to turn all of this on its head and forecast for you what's going to happen in this second month of this military operation. But first, what the 30 days have looked like.
"30 days of destruction." "30 days since Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. Innocent lives lost and an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. 1 month since the war in Eastern Europe began, it shows no signs of slowing down. On February 24, Russian President Vladimir Putin, in an early morning televised address, announced a special military operation in Ukraine with an aim to demilitarize and denazify the country. The first city to bear the brunt of Russian aggression was the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, located just about 75 kilometers south of Belarus.
We're all the citizens of the beautiful country, and we are fighting for our freedom. We're defending our freedom. Be prepared to protect your country on the squares of your cities and towns.
Thousands of civilians enlisted in the armed forces to fight for their motherland. From making concoctions of Molotov cocktails to direct confrontation with Russian tanks, and even abuses hurled to Russian soldiers' faces. Ukraine's common citizen showed indomitable grit and determination to protect their soil. Russian troops had already deployed missiles and launched air raids on Ukraine's military stations, even targeting civilian structures. As Putin and his coterie dangled the nuke threat, Russian troops captured the Chernobyl nuclear plant in northern Ukraine, the site of one of the worst nuclear disasters in human history. On March 1, satellite imagery showed a Russian military convoy closing in on Ukraine. Russia's onslaught continued as several rounds of talks failed between the two sides. Kyiv was the worst impacted by the attacks, where shelling and missile rains changed the face of the city completely. Pressure also began to increase on the port city of Mariupol in the east and Kherson in the south, which was snatched by the Russians on March 2nd. Days later, Russia expanded its attack into western Ukraine, launching several deadly missile strikes on the military base in Yavoriv. Despite Russian forces continuing to lay siege on Mariupol, Ukraine on March 21 refused to accept a Russian ultimatum to surrender the port city. While Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stood up to the Russian might, he has made some climb downs too, laying groundwork for a possible truce in future. He has accepted that his country will not join NATO, one of the key demands of Putin.
Що ви цінуєте? Але НАТО ще належить показати, що Альянс може зробити для порятунку людей, показати, що це дійсно найпотужніше оборонне об'єднання в світі. І світ чекає. І Україна дуже чекає. Чекає реальних дій, реальних гарантій безпеки.
With each passing hour, Ukraine war is becoming the fastest growing humanitarian crisis Europe has seen since the Second World War. Diplomatic efforts are on to secure a ceasefire, and yet reports of civilian deaths in Ukrainian cities continue to make headlines. Once a bustling, lively and colorful country, many Ukrainian cities are becoming ghost towns. Bureau Report, India Today.
Let me now show you how the map of Ukraine has changed in 30 days. This invasion started late in February, on February 23rd, as a matter of fact. Today is 30 days later, and we've got a map, and our data intelligence unit has basically depicted graphically how the map of Ukraine has changed since the invasion began. This is how things actually started out. You'll see the red parts of it spread, which basically show an almost complete encirclement of Ukraine. From the northern part, that's near the Kyiv area, as you can see. Then you've got the Sumy area over here. You've got Kharkiv down here as well. And then you've got the eastern part, which remember, Russia had already declared independent. And you've got Crimea down here. You've got Mariupol, the city that's currently still under siege, that's over here. So if you look at the larger picture here, it's pretty clear that over 30 days, half of Ukraine has been completely encircled, from the Black Sea all the way to the east and all the way to the north part surrounding the Kyiv area. The Russians have come in and taken control of that territory. Geographically, most of the country is still under Ukrainian control, but this gives you a sense of how much encirclement has taken place of the country as a whole. Joining me live now are our reporters on the ground. We have Dennis joining us live from Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's second largest city. It's also where some of the worst damage has been done. Gaurav Sawant is with us live from Warsaw, Poland, where President Joe Biden landed just a short while ago. We'll have Geeta Mohan with us. She's on a train on her way to Donbas in the eastern part of Ukraine in just a bit. Dennis, I want to start with you. You are in Kharkiv. Even there appears to be something of a lull, something of a calming down of tensions over the last 2-3 days. Is that true in Kharkiv, or is the shelling and missile attacks still happening there?
No, so basically, from what we can see throughout the last couple of days, we've seen the intensity is getting bigger and bigger of shelling. Right. So before that, for example, if we took time like 1 week ago, the shellings were mostly done throughout the night. However, right now, they're being implemented throughout the whole day. So if you go out during the day, you can hear the sound of explosions all around the city. So right now the situation is a bit worse than it used to be.
You're saying that it's worse than it used to be. What is the status as far as Kharkiv is concerned, Dennis? Is it still in Ukrainian control? Are the attacks still happening from the outside, or has it become a Mariupol-like situation where there is a besiegement of the city, but you've also got Russian forces on the inside of the city?
No, so Russian forces actually almost never penetrated the city. So there was only one when they got into the city, and they got eliminated on the same day. From now on, from what we can see and from what our officials are telling us, basically Russians are shelling us from the territory of Russia, sometimes also from the Black Sea territory. So they actually cannot enter the city. It's not possible for them due to our military defending the city. So it's not an option for them to enter the city. So at this moment, the only thing that they can do is to shell us from somewhere far away.
Okay, so the only option right now is to shell from far away. I'm going to go to Gaurav after I ask the 10 big questions. But before I ask the 10 big questions that we are asking here on India Today as we forecast the next 30 days of this invasion, Geeta Mohan, our foreign affairs editor, is on a train. She's the first Indian reporter in Moscow. She's currently on a train, as you can see. She's traveling from Moscow to the Donbas region in the eastern part of Ukraine that is currently Russian-controlled and Russian-held. Geeta, today marks 1 month since this invasion began. What is the sense that you've been getting from Moscow and during your travels in Russia, about how Russia is going to take things forward now? There is already a sense that this is evidently stretched beyond the time frame that Russia intended it to.
Well, yes, we are on a border train from Moscow to a border town called Rostov, where we'll try to cross over from Russia into the Donbas region. But the sense that we got in Moscow is that time frame over here is not of the essence. What is of the essence over here is to ensure that they that Ukraine and the Ukrainian administration runs out of patience. That a negotiated settlement has to do with the demands that now Moscow has put forth, which is not just neutrality, but also recognizing Crimea and the two republics announced by Putin as independent states, that's Donetsk and Luhansk. Is that really going to happen? And how long can Russia really withstand the sanctions? This is a country that has lived with sanctions, but this time around the sanctions are rather harsh. It's not just about being out of the SWIFT transaction, it's also about the kind of squeeze on the reserves that Russia has, and that certainly has come as a shock to Moscow. So a difficult situation that Moscow is in, but certainly when it comes to the domestic financial systems, it's in place, supplies not scarce, in place.
And Geeta, as you can see, is in a train. She's on her way to Donbass. Gaurav Sawant is who we're going to go to next, our senior executive editor, who is India's most watched reporter on the ground in the Ukraine war. He's going to be in Ukraine in the next 24 to 48 hours. He's in Warsaw right now, where we've stationed him because President Biden is there. Before I go to Gaurav, these are the questions that Gaurav and us here on India Today are asking at this time. It comes just on the back of that big NATO and EU summit that have taken place, where the West are trying to put even more pressure on Putin. The first question that we're asking, as NATO flexes, is Putin getting an even bigger reason to escalate this war? 30 days in, are we going to see it get worse? Question number 2, are the NATO and EU offering anything new to Ukraine? They're pumping in weapons, but are they doing anything new, including, closing out the airspace? Has Putin successfully drawn a red line for NATO? Has he basically proven that the NATO can't do anything beyond what it is doing right now? Question number 4 that we're asking right now, will this second month see even worse destruction, or will there continue to be this tense calm until there is, some kind of clarity on what's next? Is Putin about to unleash a second wave of attacks? That's another sense that many analysts believe could be the reality. Question number 6, will Russia's second wave involve more advanced weapons? The Russian MOD has been putting out videos since yesterday of long-range ballistic missile attacks on Ukrainian targets. Question number 7 that we're asking, will total invasion bog down Putin into an unmanageable and unsustainable insurgency, especially in the Kyiv metropolitan area? Is that something that Putin is aware of and cognizant of as he takes decisions on those next steps? Question number 8 that we're asking, is Putin looking for some kind of dignified exit from Ukraine? Has he miscalculated and botched up this entire operation and now decided, I need to look good as I unplug from this invasion? Question number 9, how many more sanctions will make Putin actually decide to pause this entire invasion of Ukraine? He's been saddled with sanctions. Biden announced even more yesterday. What's the red line before Putin says enough is enough? And finally, what is NATO's red line before it says enough is enough from our side? We have to get into this to protect the rest of Europe and the rest of the world from Putin. I want to go back to Gaurav Sawant. He's in Warsaw, Poland, where President Biden landed just about an hour ago for a meeting with the Polish president. Gaurav, you've just heard all those questions. Those are questions we've all been wondering about. What's the sense you're picking up on the ground? You've been reporting amazingly from places where weapons have been flowing into Ukraine. You've shown us those refugee camps as well. Is NATO and are Biden and NATO going to be able to achieve anything at all after this visit?
Shiv, that's a very interesting question. And the last question that you asked, what are NATO's red lines? Perhaps President Duda also wants to know the answer to this. And that's why he's interacting with the American President Joe Biden. And he's having a word right now with the humanitarian aid providers. A detailed briefing is being made to him even as we speak. After this, the president interacts with the members of the 82nd Airborne Division of the American Armed Forces. And then he comes here to Warsaw, again interacts with humanitarian aid workers and has a series of meetings with the Polish leadership here. Shiv, Poland is very nervous at this point of time because what's happening in Ukraine, the indications are sooner than later you'll have Poland sharing a border with a Russia-friendly regime unless NATO steps in a much bigger way than they have so far. So while the United Kingdom says they will send another additional 6,000 NLAW missiles, anti-tank guided missiles, while America may be sending $800 million worth of more military hardware, including the Javelins and the Stingers. But will that be enough? 500 missiles a day is what President Zelensky is looking at, according to a report of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. But will he get 500 missiles a day and a sustained supply? He wants a virtual blank check in terms of anti-ship and anti-air surface-to-air missiles. So this is going to be a long drawn-out affair. 30 days into this, the map that you were showing our viewers is an indication where this conflict is as on date. Mariupol, you have the Russians well and truly entrenched in there. Kharkiv, big fight happening, as Dennis was just telling us. From the north, till Chernobyl, the Russians are in control. They're virtually on the outskirts of Kyiv, at Irpin and Bucha and Brovary. So this is an indication, Shiv, that the Russians are steadily moving forward. Will they intensify these operations in the days and weeks ahead? Because whatever sanctions had to be put in place by NATO and EU, they have already been put in place.
Okay.
The brunt is actually being borne by the people of Ukraine. 2.1 million in this country, desperately looking for assistance. And European Union says that the ships with wheat that they want to get across to Ukraine, they are unable to do so with the Russian Black Sea Fleet controlling access to Ukraine. So who's getting the short end of the stick? It's the president and the people of Ukraine.
And, we've got live pictures not far from where Gaurav is reporting. These are pictures you see on your screen right now of Joe Biden, the US president, interacting with US soldiers in Poland right now. Images, that have been put out by the US government and NATO, of course. All of this, of course, crafted to, boost morale, a pat on the shoulder for the NATO forces with the, man holding the biggest office in the world, really, the President of the United States, right there in person, just 50 kilometers from the Ukraine border. Geeta, quickly coming to you, Biden in Poland, live pictures of him with US soldiers there. He will be, he's not very far from the border areas to put a focus on the humanitarian crisis. What is Moscow making of the West appearing to unite against Putin? I mean, they always were united, but this series of big meetings, the NATO, the EU summit, and now his physical presence 50 kilometers from the Ukraine border, Geeta.
Well, yes, Moscow has very sharply and keenly watched the visit of US President Biden to the Eastern European nations, be it Belgium or, for that matter, now Poland. There is a sense that the European nations and the West are uniting to ensure that the NATO member states are safe, given that the attack by Russia in one of the border areas touching Poland did come as a scare. Also, the fact that Moscow has been saying that should there be escalation, should there be boots on the ground, any sort of interference or meddling within Ukraine, that would escalate into a full-fledged war between the West and Russia, and then Russia could resort to nuclear attacks. That's one big scare for President Biden. But the fact of the matter is that they're trying to posture. A lot of it is optics. President Biden going and meeting with the US soldiers who are now on the ground in Poland. Also, reassure that the place that he's chosen to visit is also very interesting because that's one of the border points from where a lot of humanitarian aid is being sent and refugees are coming in from Ukraine into Poland. So a very, very significant visit in terms of optics and posturing, but in terms of a real term of help to Ukraine, apart from giving them weapons, the no-fly zone that Ukraine demanded has not been met with. There is no direct help. Ukraine is fighting it alone. And for Russia, this is advantage Russia, where Ukraine now has to decide whether it wants to continue fighting or wants a quicker negotiated settlement. A settlement that might not go well or may not go down well for Zelensky and the Ukrainian administration.
Geeta, please do stay safe. We're going to keep coming back to you. Geeta is on her way to Donbass. She'll be the first Indian reporter reporting from there as well. We're leaving no stone unturned to bring you this entire unfolding story firsthand. Dennis continues to be with us from Kharkiv. Maria, welcome. She's with us from Kyiv. She will be with us in just a moment. Before I go to both our Ukrainian friends, I want to play out for you. Sometimes dialogue can avert events taking a serious turn. But despite a lot of talks, 6 rounds of talks and an intervention, the war in Ukraine could not be avoided. In fact, Paris and Berlin have been central to diplomatic efforts to avert a showdown over Ukraine. Germany and France had mediated way back in 2014 when Russia had annexed Crimea and the eastern regions of Ukraine had declared independence. The two had brokered the Minsk agreements, and the two agreements aimed at ending the previous war in eastern Ukraine. While the fighting did not stop, for 8 years, Germany and France in particular had been keeping the channel open with Moscow, arguing for the need to keep the channels of communication open. But in the end, all efforts at diplomacy failed, and that's the reason why we're wondering if things are actually about to get worse in Ukraine. Take a look at this report, and then we go to our Ukrainian friends on the ground.
Through January and most of February 2022, Russia continued amassing its troops along the northern and eastern borders of Ukraine. Russian and Belarusian troops carried out a joint exercise very close to Ukraine's borders. Even as alarm bells began ringing across the capitals of Western democracies, Ukraine seemed to be sighted bang in the middle of Putin's crosshairs. But the master of Kremlin kept saying that this was just a military exercise, nothing more.
If it depends on us, the Russian Federation, there will be no war. We don't want war, but we will not allow violating our interests. And ignoring our interests, we will not allow either.
As tension kept mounting, countries began to ask their citizens to leave Ukraine. On February 13th, the presidents of USA and Ukraine had a telephonic conversation stressing the importance of pursuing diplomacy and deterrence in response to Russia's build-up on Ukraine's borders. President Zelensky invited President Biden to Kyiv, saying, "I'm convinced that your visit to Kyiv in the coming days would be a powerful signal and help stabilize the situation." A day before, on February 12th, the US had shifted its 150 National Guard troops that were posted there out of Ukraine. It also began asking its embassy staff to leave Kyiv. On the other side of the world, in Honolulu, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said the risk of Russian military action is high enough and the threat is imminent enough that this is the prudent thing to do. In Germany, President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who had just been re-elected, said Putin should not underestimate the strength of Western resolve over Ukraine. He said, "I appeal to President Putin to loosen the noose around Ukraine's neck and join us in seeking a way to preserve peace in Europe." On 25th of February, Russian troops crossed the border with Ukraine.
And joining me live, let's go straight across to both Kharkiv and Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, where Dennis and Maria have been reporting. Maria, quickly to you first. The US president is 50 kilometers from the Ukraine border. Is there anything substantive that Ukraine is expecting from what's happening? The NATO summit happened yesterday. Lots of symbolism at the European Union as well. But is Ukraine expecting anything to change vis-a-vis the West after Biden's visit?
Of course, in the public rhetoric, not so many optimistic comments that we have seen from Ukrainian government, from Ukrainian president. This gesture of Mr. Biden is seen more as a sign of tremendous support for Ukraine, as we know that being close to the border with Ukraine, even in Poland for him, could be even a risk, because Russians targeted the places 20 kilometers from Polish border. So this gesture for all people here in Ukraine, and especially for the politics, for the government here in Ukraine, shows the support that the United States, of course, they don't want to get their hands into this war to and just this moment you can hear the sounds of air defense system in Kyiv working, and of course they do not want to strengthen this air defense system with their weapons, because then this would mean that the US entered the war, full-on war with Russia. We of course understand these red lines of the US partners of President Biden, but this visit to Poland is seen here as a tremendous act of support, and maybe some statements, some important statements about maybe some other types of weapons given to Ukraine could be made. This is what are the official expectations are here today in Kyiv about Biden's visit to Poland.
Okay, very important, about some more advanced coming in. What about you, Dennis? What do you think? You know, there are very symbolic gestures. There are words of support. All the right things are being said. All the right pictures are going out. All the right sanctions are being imposed on Russia. But as far as Ukraine is concerned, is this enough? Are these gestures and symbols enough? Maria mentioned that there is an expectation of even more advanced weapons beyond just the anti-tank weapons and the air defense weapons that are coming in via NATO. What do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, we can see perfectly what's going on outside of Ukraine with all of the support from Western partners, and not only Western partners, like around the globe. However, what we do pay a closer attention to is basically what is substantially being done, being implemented. For example, from who we receive weapons. And as of this moment, we didn't get too much of support from NATO. However, we got support from those countries that are in NATO bloc, especially the United States as well. So as of now, for example, about the visiting, we are expecting to hear some more news, for example, on Boris Johnson, who actually wanted to come to Ukraine, to Kyiv, to meet our President Zelensky. So I guess at this point it means way more, so we could see ourselves inside of our country, those politicians coming to our country, because it was a very good gesture, for example, from the prime ministers of a couple of countries, for example, from Poland, to come into Kyiv to see by themselves what's going on in our country. Obviously, it's also a good gesture of support from the United States president, and we do understand that it is quite dangerous for him to go into Ukraine, especially considering the amount of influence that he holds right now for the whole world. But yeah, the most attention that is being paid from Ukrainians is basically to this substantial help that is being sent to Ukraine, humanitarian aid, weapons, and we are actually expecting to receive more anti-air defense systems from NATO countries, as it was announced yesterday. So we're looking forward to this in the first place.
Dennis and Maria, appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much. Please stay safe. You're both in cities which are still under attack. You know, while Maria was talking, you heard that air defense system go off, somewhere behind her. So there might be a sort of relative calm in Kyiv compared to the previous few weeks, but things are clearly, only just one step away from violence. And where Dennis is reporting from, the shelling, heavy shelling has continued today. Both frontline reporters on the ground, not second-hand information. They're right there to tell you what's going on. And that's what we're committed to in Ukraine. Thank you very much, Maria and Dennis. Stay safe, both of you, and we'll keep coming back to you. India Today, like we just showed you, is the only channel that's been reporting non-stop from Ukraine, from Russia, for 30 days. From Kyiv to Kharkiv, from Poland to Moscow, India Today has the most committed team of reporters on the ground. And that's the reason why India Today is the most watched channel on the world's biggest security story. Geeta Mohan is the first and only journalist from India in Moscow. She's on her way right now to a border area of Donbas on the Ukrainian border. Here's her dispatch from Moscow first on what the people of Moscow think 1 month into this invasion.
Russia, at this point in time, is fighting a war of an existential war, a threat that Russia feels with the NATO allies coming together and NATO's expansion into Ukraine. the action that they justify in Ukraine. Russians over here saying that they do not require these brands if it means compromising Russia's security.
Many reports suggested that banking services have been hit, but for now things seem to be smooth. Many Russians believe that there would be big issues in the coming weeks.
One of the reasons why there is a belief that the second wave of this Russian attack could be imminent and on the horizon is because Russia has formally unveiled the use of long-range weapons. Russia claims to have now used sea-based long-range missiles to destroy an arsenal in northwest Ukraine on Tuesday, not very far from the Poland border. Moscow released a video that shows the launch of a Caliber cruise missile against Ukrainian armed forces. And today they put out another video of a long-range ballistic missile as well. Take a look. 30 days into this war, let's never forget that the direct impact of all the bombs and the missiles that have dropped as part of Putin's invasion is the huge and still unfolding human catastrophe. The crisis in Ukraine, hundreds dead, millions displaced, many of them children. And that's something that hasn't stopped. After 30 days, we look back at how bad things really are and how much worse they can get. The Ukraine war continues to be our top focus on India Today. Thanks very much for watching this broadcast. Much more coming up on the other side. Stay with India Today.